Hello, Charlotte.
Hello, Kai.
So Charlotte's my dear stepmother. She's a very exceptional woman, and she's had a big impact on my life. And so I'm here with her today because I want to share her wisdom.
Okay.
So, what is mindfulness? Oh no, first tell me a little bit, everyone, about your background.
Okay. So I'm Danish, and I came to Australia as a Rotary Exchange student. And I suppose I've always been a seeker, I think. I remember looking in the mirror at 18 going, what is it that people see when they look at this? They all see the same thing and react in the same way to this thing. But I'm never the same. I don't have a clue what's going on. And I think that was the first time I really became sort of, what's it all about? And so I then went on a sort of trajectory of modelling and fashion design, and then did a qualification in transformative learning, which really sits in the Danish ethos, which is this thing of, as learners, we're sitting as an equal as a facilitator, right? So how do I support the best in you? Right? How do I kind of hold that? And then corporate training, all that sort of stuff, and then was always looking for something. Did a lot of mediation, conflict resolution, but was looking. And then when I eventually found mindfulness, I went, now we're talking. Because everything else had sat within our Western culture paradigms, which of course are just that. They're like frameworks for seeing the world, and they're deeply flawed. Whereas mindfulness was much, held in the Buddhist context, which was much more of true to life paradigm, right? So that there wasn't anything we have to go, oh yeah, by the way, we have to undo this. For instance, our paradigm around, the more you have, the happier you'll be, which is the old kind of, and most of us still believe in it, right? And that it's deeply delusional. Well, in Buddhism, we don't have that. It goes, contentment is an inside job. It doesn't matter what you have out here and what you don't have out there. Ultimately, it's an inside job. And it's getting to know the mind, and that's what mindfulness is. So, a lot of the time we're using mindfulness to still function within our Western paradigms, aren't we? Yeah. If I just calm down a little bit, I can run a bit faster and be more productive, and capacity will go up. But we're going, well, actually, ideally, it opens up a window to a whole new paradigm. It goes, the new car didn't do it. This didn't do it. And when I get annoyed with you, you're my teacher in what is being triggered in me. Right? I start to go, oh, right, and that then starts us on a truly new journey.
So with your mindfulness, I know that you've worked with the military and psychologists, and could you share a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so I always think, when you come onto something really good, you want to make sure that many people have access to it. And so we thought, well, why don't we train psychologists in it? So that was the very first thing that we did, was to ensure that they had those techniques, those insights to really help patients and clients. And then, of course, there was a demand for doing it in the workplace, and that's probably what I still do the most of. And it works really well because in the workplace we have the opportunity to set up structures where we go, okay, we're doing our mindfulness training now. We're doing these 10 minutes every day. And of course, that's what makes the difference. And they often commit to the 6 to 8 weeks program, which is what will give the results. And of course, it changes organizations from the inside out, right? Because people change, and they go, well, that doesn't work. That works. That's really not sustainable. And we were talking a little bit about self-care, and that kind of, dawned on me how insane it is the way we see self-care. We sort of go, we're productive, and now we should do a little thing of self-care. So I'm sitting on a cafe, I'm sitting on a bench talking to guys, #self-care, because anything that isn't productive is self-care. When did we lose the plot that badly? So, when I was a child, my father would come home at, about 3, and then we'd have afternoon tea. We didn't #self-care. That was life, right? And then we'd go for a walk, and then we'd, some would do pottery, some would play their instrument, or whatever, right? But that was just life. You didn't work all the time. You had an afternoon off, most afternoons. Right? So I suppose, I'm sitting a little bit with this thing with self-care. We tend to actually call it radical self-responsibility. But I hesitate a little bit with that because some people are so deeply damaged that taking responsibility is very challenging. But I suppose, radical self-responsibility in organizations is really relevant to say, particularly if I'm in leadership, that I take responsibility for my foundational needs, which we would hashtag self-care of sleep, good food, exercise, connecting with loved ones, doing something that I really enjoy, and then offering to the workplace from that deeply human space.
Beautiful. And maybe could you expand more on what is mindfulness?
Yeah. So mindfulness, of course, sits within Buddhism. So, and I think, we've kind of dusted off the deeper insights a lot of the time that Buddhism offers mindfulness, which is a shame in many ways because they're so rich and so profound. For instance, the fact that everything changes every moment, that ongoing unfolding, which is both a comfort, of course, and a source of distress. So comfort when we think things are going badly, and when things are going well, we want it to last. For instance, there's natural imprints almost on our system. But mindfulness itself, of course, is a practice to observe how our reactive self, everything that's happened to us in up till this point, is our reactive self. So every little moment has formed me into this moment, right? In a context of I want to get away from anything unpleasant, and I want to move towards what feels good, with a twist of a high negative bias, because that's how we form. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So that's my reactive self, and that reactive self is what I'm observing in mindfulness, because it meets and greets every moment like a pulse, right? So contraction, negative thought. Can I open up to space and choice? And so we'll never be perfect. That's why we need to practice it. It becomes a life practice of living mindfully, is living aware with how is the reactive self greeting this moment and coming into choice.
Wonderful explanation. And so
Right.
Mindfulness originated through Buddhism,
Yes.
my understanding?
Yes, that's right.
I think Buddhism is such an incredible philosophy that holds so many amazing things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's very exciting from a perspective of working with it is that what the Buddha found, considering he actually started by paying careful attention to reality, that was the foundation of his practice. And that means that it's more of a science than it is a religion, right? And then we go, 2 years ago, a friend of mine who's doing a master's on neuroscience was told that the last 3 years, 75% of what we learned about the brain has occurred. Right? So what we're seeing is that this incredible research around and science around the brain corresponds absolutely to the Buddhist insights.
Wow.
There's an absolute alignment. And so there should be, because both are sciences, right? But that is kind of impressive and exciting. And the Buddha wasn't the only one. There's, amazing, like Aristotle had many amazing thinkers throughout time. Master Eckhart, 12th century sage, many Rumi, amazing people who had amazing insight, of course, and they were all aligned to this science, which they should. Right?
This is really exciting because mindfulness now is really being implemented in business, the schooling system in Australia really bringing it through. It's a philosophy that through this scientific research they can prove the benefits, and the research is saying that this is,
It works.
It works.
Yes. And also that we're so in such desperate need. Right? We are so incredibly anxious, depressed, and obese. We're out of whack, aren't we? In the extreme.
Yeah.
In spite of us having everything we thought was going to deliver happiness. We've never had it as so affluent and so good financially, and in terms of opening the tap, there comes water, our rubbish is taken away, all those basic things, and yet they haven't delivered contentment, obviously.
And this is a big issue in our day and age. Most people are in a stressed state. They're in the flight or fight. They're not breathing deeply. I think it's only like 20% of the breath that's sort of in that top layer. It's not allowing the body to fully relax. If you're breathing deeply into your stomach, your body's calming down.
Yeah.
And in that state of calmness, you're not going to be as reactive or get as emotional about a situation.
No, and also when you are never fully in what we would call your parasympathetic then everything potentially is a trigger. We start to live in that perspective of everyone's a bit annoying, everything's a bit frustrating. Gee, they're going slowly, driving slowly. You know, we are at war with the world. And mindfulness, of course, is that practice of checking in with how am I relating to this moment. So that reactive self is going, this moment isn't right, but we go, whoa, this system isn't right, right? So how do I take responsibility? And we call it radical responsibility. Responsibility for this system being at one with the moment. Right? Even in moments of danger, etc. How do I tune into being one with this moment so I choose responsibly?
Yeah.
Right. It's not accepting. It's not going, yes, keep hitting me. It's not that. But it's being present as much as we can, because there are times when the body takes over and gets us out of there from an awareness perspective. But as much as possible, step in and lean into and going, okay, what's this system? How's this system going to deal with this moment?
Yeah. Before you were showing about the body and that tapping and different things help you come into the body, could you share a bit more about that?
Well, I suppose when we work with something for a long, long time, it morphs into kind of almost your own brand of something. And it's become very clear that mindfulness of the body is the foundation for a very good reason. It should be the foundation, is our primary context of our experience is the body. So I'm writing a book at the moment about Dear Body. We've done lots of research and pilot studies around the whole Dear Body thing. So I know in every cell of my body that trauma and difficult emotions are resolved in the body. And so I was inspired by the psychiatrist Bessem van der Kolk, who came to Sydney a couple of weeks ago, and he actually was mentioning that after 9/11 there was cognitive behavioral therapy and there was some psychoanalysis on offer for people. 2 years later they went back and they said, so tell me what worked. None of that. What worked were all the body-based therapies, massage, yoga, tapping, EMDR, all of those. And actually, I don't think mindfulness of the body was particularly on offer at the time, but it would have been an amazing healing opportunity as well. So he was also saying that more and more, we should look away from drugs and look away to coming into the body. And for instance, the basic thing of tapping, the basic thing of the EMDR, which is the resetting your reactive or subconscious self through rapid eye movement. And some of those methods are very, very effective. And of course also neurofeedback. I didn't think he knew quite enough about mindfulness of the body, so I might send him an email about that, because that was a missing piece. Yeah.
Okay. And then you also then have a Facebook page on mindful eating.
Yes, yeah, where we're saying diets don't work, and stop being at war with yourself. Come into being kind of curious around what's happening. What's the eating a substitute for? How do we break habits? How can we manage our attention better? So actually, your relationship with eating becomes sort of an entry point for your relationship with life. Because we know if you take a little hone right into that little relationship with how I am with food, and you blow that up, you can go, oh, how's my relationship with life? It's the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I have a practice that I find really fulfilling, and before I eat, I hold the food and I give gratitude. So I give thanks to the person who cooked it, give thanks to the people that grew the food, thanks to the sun, to the earth, to the water. And I find when I do that process of gratitude before I eat, it just gets the saliva going in my mouth and I'm like really excited about the food, and then I eat it really slowly.
Yes.
And be conscious of my thoughts as I'm eating, because they say the thoughts that are going on while you're consuming is sort of like integrating into your space of mind or your being.
Right. Yeah, beautiful practice. And mindful eating would then go, yes, being aware of your thoughts, but trying to keep your attention on the sensation in the mouth, right? And really be with the experience and one with the experience, right? And when thoughts come in, you go, no, not time for you, time for experience.
That's a great point, because I notice sometimes when you're out at dinner, you want to talk or there's other people around, but it is beautiful to just sit and be totally present with the food, and then slowly biting, and you can taste like it heightens
eruption.
It heightens it.
Yes.
So good.
And I think also what's so lovely about it, is that we're not saying this is how you should eat all the time. I don't eat like that all the time at all. But gradually your relationship becomes more conscious around eating. You take the opportunity to go, oh, put that away and just be with it, right? So I suppose I'm saying this because I don't want people to think, oh, I don't do that, I could never do that or whatever. just have the invitation to bring it in when you remember, and see if you can do more of it. You know, and I think that practice of, wow, imagine that I have this. You know, how blessed am I? I mean, if you think about it, there are very few people throughout history who've had the amount of abundance we have had, right? So to have a plate full of food like this is really precious, isn't it? From all corners of the world, potentially. Incidentally, what also we showed up in our studies, in our kind of experiential workshops, was when we access gratitude in that experiential sense, or loving kindness, we have a fullness arise. So we actually eat less because we're not eating for the wrong reasons. Right? I'm not eating to feel good because I'm already feeling good. So I'm really eating for nourishment. And hormonally, that's about oxytocin. That oxytocin actually helps pick up and send the signals from the gut to the brain quicker around the fact that I'm full. So, yeah, it's quite fascinating.
And I've done research around that. Eating less is better. They've proved that if you eat less, your body's going to be in a healthier state and you're going to live longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, less risk of Alzheimer's and all those things as well. Yeah.
And especially then if you're choosing organic and really good quality food, you're getting a lot more nutrients and you're going to get more out of the food then too.
Yes.
Are there any other techniques that you'd recommend for people around this mindfulness, or any other?
Well, I mean, we played with a little technique last night, right, that you were a little bit excited about.
Over the moon. This is like next level.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And I like your new title. I mean, so I've called it Mindful Voice Integration, based on Big Mind, Genko Roshi. It's a Zen method, but you called it Mindfulness Practice for Supreme Consciousness. Or something?
Yeah, I was thinking that could be.
I think that's a pretty good kicker. So, yes, I love this. I think, you know, Ken Wilber, who's the most published philosopher of our time, he pronounced this method as the most astonishing development in Buddhist psychology of the last 200 years. And for his core practices in sort of achieving enlightenment, where you're focusing equally on the body, the mind, emotions, and spirit, he recommends this method for both developing our emotional self and the spiritual self. So it's profound, it's powerful, and you know, I mean, it's, you know, within a minute almost, you're there in the space that you might be on the cushion for 40 years and never get there, right? So it is absolutely astonishing. I suppose for people who can't access the, you know, a retreat or a course or something like that, if you're experiencing, you know, great anxiety, stress and overwhelm, if you can just, first of all, you'd probably start with your 5 magic breaths, which is just, you know, noticing the in-breath and allowing the out-breath to be longer than the in-breath. Do 5 of those to just down-regulate your system. And then know in your mind that calm isn't at the end of having everything done, right? Calm lives within you. So if I were to say to you, can I speak to the voice of calm? And you say, yes, you may. And I say, and who am I speaking to? And you say, you're speaking to the voice of calm. You might even go, actually, it's inner peace. The moment you go, I am speaking as the voice of inner peace, you touch it. You touch it. And there it is. So it lives within you. It's not the end of a lot of tasks. And I think that's an important thing to know, that we have it within us. It's just a question of what are we paying attention to in any given moment.
Yeah, I was really blown away with this technique. I've had a couple of weeks where it's been a little bit stressful. I've just played at an event and it was a big sort of deal for me, and so I put a lot of energy into working a 4-hour set for this event, and sort of late nights and hanging out with all these amazing people at Jan Skramko's event. And so Charlotte did a session last night using this technique, and it brought me into such a deep space so quickly that I was just blown away, like really profound, how it just took me back to how I feel when I do my 3 hours of practice every day. Like it drops me into a space I feel very connected, very calm, at peace, just that contentment. And this technique you did last night just took me there within a minute, and this is why I was so inspired to share this.
Yes, I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
So incredible.
Yes. And we, of course, played with that voice that's free of thinking, right? So that's the other thing to go. So when we have something that's dominating in our lives, like often thinking, there's actually another aspect of the self that's free of it. And to touch into that and lean into that is really useful to know as well, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Go straight from dinner into the bliss. It's quite
Yes.
amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd share about this philosophy or technique that you've learnt this with a Zen?
Zen master Genpo Roshi.
Yeah.
Yeah, who, I love him. And also Zen, to me, is kind of missing some of the body-based stuff and some compassion. So I trained with him, and I trained other facilitators in this, and changed it to mindful voice integration with his blessing. So I suppose I work with it every day in my coaching, and also I integrate it into my retreats. And I could just share the little story of a woman who came one day. She was really, agitated, and she said, I am really annoyed that I have never experienced joy. She said, I started working for my alcoholic parents when I was 5. I was 5. She was so angry. I go, okay. So then I used the technique and said, can I speak to the voice of joy? She said, it's not there, I already told you, right? I said, okay, that little grain of sand, that's joy. Can I speak to that? And I said, well, if it were there, can I speak to it? She said, all right. And then we started to speak to it, and we started to have it grow in her system. And of course she realizes that it is there. And we just spent almost the whole full hour just speaking about, so with the eyes of joy, how would you see this? How would you see that? How would your perspective be different? How does mature joy feel in your body? She came back the following week. She goes, I don't think I actually need to see you again, because I've got it on. It's like it turned on. And that is what we talk about. We awaken voices, aspects of the self that's been dormant. Right? So whether that be responsibility or wisdom or joy or whatever it might be, we can get it online. So it's an incredibly powerful process. And of course, after my book on Dear Body, this will be the domain that I hope to just work in, really, because I think I came to it because I was doing mindfulness, and I realized that not all mindfulness teachers are wonderful, and we don't necessarily translate 40 years on the cushion to being an amazing human. So I thought there's something that stops us, and one of those things is that we cannot penetrate delusion in mindfulness. Our own delusion of I'm amazing or I'm whatever. This technique does it. Knowing that we have everything within us, from Mother Teresa to Hitler, and it's liberating to go, yeah, shame lives here, guilt lives here, great compassion lives here, frustration, anger. It all lives here because that's part of being human.
It brings up a point there. We're talking about the shame and the guilt. I recently went to a retreat, Innate Wisdom. Phoenix and Mike, who are friends of mine, and they're like next level trainers and helping people to evolve. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they talked about was really taking the shame and sharing that. When you share your shame in a group, sort of like taking the shadow aspect and just bringing it into the light.
Yes.
It's by acknowledging that part of us that we could squash, sort of hide. Maybe we're turning to alcohol or some sort of addiction to sort of suppress these emotions.
Yes.
By bringing that to the surface, it allows us to be held, accepted for ourselves,
yes,
and for us to let go of that baggage, to say, and then have a more fulfilling life where we can be more confident and more sort of in our power and have that sort of ability to do what we need to do and not be so reactive or going into stories. My partner says, my partner says it's like, just come back to it is what it is. I think she learnt this from Landmark or Tony Robinson, but it's like coming back to any situation rather than it being emotional or a reaction, just is what it is.
Yeah, but that's the rational point. And shame is an emotion.
Yeah.
And shame is based in a deep fear of rejection.
Yeah.
Right? Because the purpose of shame is to keep us included. Right? That's why it's so liberating when I share my shame and you don't reject me.
Yeah.
Right? Because it only thrives in secrecy.
Yeah.
When I bring it out, it's lost its grip, hasn't it?
Well, the last question I wanted to ask was about business. So I've been working on a membership site, and I was sort of really keen to share this insight because it had such a profound experience for me last night. You've worked with a lot of leaders and you've helped them in different ways. Do you have anything you'd like to share around business and mindfulness, or any of these other techniques to help with your business and growth?
Right. And so we have that little quote about growth, right? that you're going to share later. We'll have to hang in there for that. I think the big thing is that it isn't just the working life and then and then self-care. But rather, ideally, we integrate the doing with the being. So we were sharing a moment ago that, I had some things, actually some deadlines that were last night, but you were here, and also, our friend Grace needed a lift. So if I had just been in my growth mode of business, I said, that's my priority. I just need to get this done. And I go, these are not priorities. However, we're human beings, and we weigh up and go, what's most important in this? And that's really about being conscious. So there are times when you go, yes, I want this. Be clear on why you want it. I suppose that's the first thing. What do you think is going to deliver that you don't have now? Do you actually already have it now? Right? And then you're coming from a choice perspective. Like, contentment is available to us right now. So I'm not doing this thinking it's going to bring contentment. I'm doing this because I'm contributing to something in the world. That's ideally what we're doing, right? And then your anxiety is going to be much, much lower than if you think, I need this to be seen and to be heard and to be experienced myself as amazing or rich or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose that coming back to that point around self-care, that ideally traveling with that commitment to life quality and not sacrificing that for ultimately an empty thing of success. We want to, we know that competency builds confidence, absolutely. So we want to build confidence. But however you contribute, whether it is that you take the parking money with kindness and love, or you're running a multi-million-dollar business, it doesn't really matter. We're just little humans contributing in our way.
So true. Yeah, it's about your priorities, and I guess looking at too, what is your priorities, what is important, and I'm so grateful that you're able to come down and spend this time. It's been so special, and it's so amazing, Charlotte.
Well, so are you guys. Yeah. It's what we see in others is what we have within ourselves, right? It's the mirror.
It's a reflection.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm very blessed to have you as a reflection.
Okay.
Anything else that you'd like to share? Maybe you've worked with a lot of clients. What is some feedback from your clients or results you've had from doing one-on-one coaching?
Yeah. So there's a couple of key things that come back after so many years. The first thing is to know the situation, whatever you're feeling as stress or anxiety, as an opportunity to grow. Like, that is your teacher. Like, the barking dog now is our teacher. Are we thinking, do we have to redo it? Is it okay? Etc. Right? That takes the attention away. That's our teacher. Whatever's irritating you, that's your teacher. Right? You're comfortable. And so that's the first thing, and that brings on the responsibility. It's not happening to me, but rather interesting what's occurring and my reaction.
That's so cool that you bring that up, that around this practice of putting your hand on the heart. That's something that's really actually changed my life a lot. And I do this thing every day where I put my hand on my heart, smile and relax. And it's a technique that I've gotten from open heart meditation. But I started this 10 years ago, and I found that I was looking outside of myself for love. And when I could put my hand on my heart and give myself love, it just came to a point where I didn't need to look outside of myself for something. And this was a real game changer, because I was getting into relationships that weren't healthy. And by doing this practice, I've been able to just really drop in and that's cool that you share that teaching as well. Yeah,
well, we call it, we shift from outside eyes of often judging the body and the situation to inside eyes, and collaboration with the body. Yeah.
And then from a business perspective, now, so they're incorporating this in business and schools, so there must be a strong reason for this, and I'm guessing it's the clarity, the being more centered, more effective with your time and the communication.
Yes, reducing stress, which reduces conflict, and often conflict really contaminates trust, and we know when trust is low, speed is low and cost goes up, whereas trust is high, we have speed that goes up and cost goes down. So trust is really a commodity that we should take very seriously, and mindfulness kind of protects and enhances trust. And we don't talk much about that, but that's actually one of the main things we're seeing in organizations. The being less reactive to situations, so then we're better able to emotionally down-regulate, so we don't have as many aggressive conversations, we don't fly off the handle, and even just getting frustrated ourselves, we go, oh wow, the body's in this state, I better just do my 5 magic breaths. We take ownership of this. So there are so many aspects. I mean, there's over 150,000 research articles on mindfulness. Many of them are just nonsense. So if you're curious about it, you can check them out on my website. But also, you're just looking for mindfulness programs that go for 6 to 8 weeks, because that's the key thing. In anything else than that, it's not mindfulness. It's just an introduction to an idea, right? But mindfulness is a practice, and we must have the attending to it on a daily basis over a minimum about ideally 8 weeks, and then you'll see the results without fail. So, we used to go and say, well, let's go and swing in ropes and hope it'll translate into amazing teams. Had no idea. Whenever I do mindfulness, people often want to say, well, what's the science behind it? There's plenty of science.
You brought up before about emotions, and recently I read an article about high emotional intelligence, and the fact that a lot of companies choose someone with high emotional intelligence over someone with a high IQ.
Yes.
And that 70 to 80% of the most successful people in the world have high emotional intelligence.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, because it comes back to the trust issue, right? And collaboration. If you don't have high emotional intelligence, you're always going to be sabotaging your relationships, right? And you may sit there very well by yourself, being very clever, but what does it matter? It doesn't really matter. You'll be sabotaging the organization, you'll be sabotaging the relationships. So, and also, in terms of contentment, we are contagious, and it tends to be that when I have higher EQ, then I'm naturally a little bit more contented, right? Because I have more access to gratitude and all of those sort of things. And so I'm just by being, I'm a healthy contributor to an organization, to sort of the grid, if you like, in an organization or in a family or in any group, right? Rather than somebody who withdraws from it because they're highly reactive. So, certainly the technique of micro-voice integration is incredible in propelling our emotional intelligence, in acknowledging that all emotions come from sort of a handshaking. If we go back to shame, there's shame, and then there's immature shame, which is when it clouds everything. And anything that when somebody looks at me, I go, ooh, they don't like me, and I'm wrong, or what did I spill, or am I, I'm fat, or whatever it might be, where it's all consuming. And then one where we put it in the basement, we pretend it's not part of this show, right? And there are many reasons it's so uncomfortable. But what happens when it's in the basement? It leaks out covertly, right? So I might be passively aggressive, shaming others, for instance, right? Or overcompensating. We're going, can you all see me? Because I don't want to own my shame, which of course is the typical narcissist. And then we go into the mature shame, which is the one we talked about before, where if I'm speaking to mature shame, it's going, I'm your mate. I'm here to keep you included and let you know when you've just talked a little bit too much now, or just dial that down a little, or just to be a healthy human being in a community sense. Right.
So incredible, isn't it? And yesterday you mentioned that you worked with a child who had a lot of anger and was sort of behaving really poorly. Yeah,
a teenager actually, completely acting out. And we had a bit of dialogue, but he was just, I don't know, no, I don't want to do that. It felt like he had kind of given up. And the only thing that got him back online was to go, can I speak to the voice of wisdom? And then, of course, he started to say everything himself, or the voice of wisdom did, that he had heard and he knew very well. And that got him going and going, yeah, I should stop seeing these people, I should do this, I should do this. And so no one else telling him, but him telling himself, which is much more powerful.
Amazing, because the children are where our future's at, so the more we can help them grow and learn, and I guess this is what they're doing with the schooling system, implementing mindfulness and emotional intelligence too, to my understanding, was just included in the curriculum for Australian schooling. Right,
and see, the mindfulness professional in me barks a little bit at that, because mindfulness is emotional intelligence, right? But we have different interest groups that bring in these things. And in mindfulness, naturally, there's nothing more powerful to emotionally downregulate. Emotional intelligence is often sold as an intellectual pursuit. We should understand this. Whereas mindfulness deals with our emotions from an inside out. I can tell you, before I got to mindfulness, I was almost emotionally illiterate. It was mindfulness and mindfulness of the body that brought me emotional intelligence. From this way, not as something that I'm trying to access from here, right? So if we do mindfulness well, we get both we non-reactive but responsive. We become emotionally intelligent. We also, cognitive behavioral therapy is also integrated in mindfulness. Mindfulness holds it all when we just access the full program.
You said you're about to release a podcast as well?
Yeah, well, we've done a couple, and then we've got the 3 that are on our Dear Body program, which I did with a colleague of mine, Michael Bunting. And they're really, I really think they're quite beautiful. So they were sitting kind of in a drawer a little bit, and I thought, no, we have to get them out. And they, of course, also are describing what my book, Dear Body, is about, which I'm finally finalizing. Yeah, bit of an ordeal writing a book.
It is a huge one. My partner's writing a book, and it's a big job.
Yes, yeah, worthwhile, hopefully. So that matters most must never come at the cost of that matters least. Right? So if my thing is saying, I want to get to this is really important to me, as you're saying, then yes, how do I prioritize that? While still knowing that the sand has to somehow fit in, the relationships or whatever other elements. How do I do that? And I self-monitor. That's the key thing, right? I go for a walk in the morning. That's what I have to make sure. I go to bed at a time so I have my 8 hours. I make sure I eat well. So my system is in order for me to be able to make wise choices. And then I start the cleaning up. How much am I doing the social media? How much am I spending time with people that actually this is not really working for me? It's not really contributing to anything. So I start cleaning up.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, those priorities. It's like working out what is the most important thing to you.
Yes.
And then
acting on that.
Yeah, making sure that you're sort of,
Yes. While we still have a kind of an ability to surrender to the moment and go, I don't know, I'm going to stop now and open to this moment. Like, for me, I was on my this morning and then going, oh no, well, okay, we'll give space to this. So how do we, at this, and while we're directional, at the same time be open and curious to what might emerge? Because we might just, there's that famous story of the amazing violinist playing on the most amazing violin in the subway in New York. And everyone just walked past him, except a child went, wow, what's this? So we don't want to miss the wonder either, right? So that's I suppose, the mindfulness. Yes, they're the techniques and they work for people, and sometimes we just need something to help us in the chaos. But it's so much more than that.
Oh, yes.